Story 1. A coworker lost his elderly mother and father in the same week. One expected soon anyway, the other not so expected. He took a couple of weeks off compassionate leave to organize everything and grieve. The timing was difficult for the team, but these things aren't exactly scheduled, are they? The manager complained, but the appropriate response was, "Sorry for your loss, and let us know if you need anything." On his return, the toxic manager commented in the first meeting back that both parents passing in the same week was convenient because he wouldn't need more time off in the near future, leaving us in a difficult situation. This is the same manager who, a few months later, told an employee to maybe give up trying after she took a week off following her third miscarriage, complaining she had time off for the first two. He was let go shortly after because these are just two examples of how toxic he was. Story 2. The supervisor stormed into the break room while everyone was having a 15-minute coffee break. He told everyone off for taking a break and talking too loudly. If that was not bad enough, we had a part-time and casual employee who would come in to do a specific task when needed. Sometimes she was there 2 to 3 days a week. Sometimes we would not see her for a few weeks, all depending on demand. She showed up about 2 minutes before the supervisor arrived and caused a disturbance. During the disturbance, the supervisor singled her out, saying that if everyone had so much free time to take coffee breaks, then we probably did not need her to come in on a casual basis and that she should look for another job. Everyone went silent and left the break room. A few minutes later, the part-time and casual employee held back tears as she went into his office to give him her time card for the previous week. No one was upset when that supervisor was transferred. Story 3. I worked in corporate marketing and sales. We worked on commission based on marketing campaigns that we created. Last year, we got a new boss who decided to restructure our commission, effectively cutting our pay by about 25 to 30%. Morale became quite low. A month after this happened, she called us all into a meeting. She then showed us a chart for the past year where we had almost tripled profits for the company. This was met with stunned silence. "Hey everyone," she said. "Where's the enthusiasm? Aren't you happy with these numbers?" Flat, tone-deaf silence. The outrage was palpable. I wanted to say something, as I'm sure others did, but I didn't. I just found a different job a few months later. To be clear, the pay cut had not gone into effect yet at the time of the meeting, and the charts reflected the past year. So we tripled profits for them, and the reward was a pay cut. The pay cut did not influence the profits. That was all us. Story 4. The man sent a racist joke by email using the company global address. It was sent to everyone in Ireland, the United Kingdom, China, Africa, the European Union, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Story 5. We were in the women's bathroom in the morning when a coworker walked in after extended maternity leave. Everyone greeted her and asked how her baby was. She was smiling at first, but as soon as we mentioned her baby, her face fell and she went a bit pale. She said it died. Before anyone could say anything, another woman right in front of her replied, "My baby is gorgeous. She's just 4 months old and laughs beautifully." Story 6. I started my career at a federal agency and worked with a man who was extremely troubled and generally strange. He did all kinds of unusual things, but the event that shook the whole office was an email he sent out one morning. He was apparently dating another employee in a different division of the agency, and they broke up. He sent an email to about 200 coworkers with the subject line, "Please respect our privacy." He then included about 3 pages of narrative explaining every detail of his relationship with this woman who ended the relationship, concluding with, "So we will no longer be getting married." I will never forget the morning that email went out, and the entire office went silent for about 5 minutes. No typing, no phone calls, no small talk. Just a group of people trying to process what they had just read. No one knew they were dating, no one cared if they broke up, and it was never going to be a topic of office conversation until he brought it to everyone's attention in the most unusual way possible. To make it worse, the woman found out and said, "Married? We went out like 5 times. Somehow, this man believed casual dating guaranteed marriage and felt the need to announce to everyone that the marriage was off. It was very strange. Story 7. He made an insensitive comment about a coworker just being overweight all along, less than a month after she had a miscarriage. Human resources intervened. Story 8. When I worked in retail, I was training a new employee. At the very first break of his first day, we were at a table in the break room making small talk when he suddenly asked, "So, do you shave your pubic area?" It became quiet quickly. I got up and walked to the manager's office, and word had reached them before I did. They told me to take the rest of the day off with pay. I was informed that he got up a few minutes later and just walked out the front door. Story 9. One coworker's father had a stroke. This happened on a Thursday when we were very busy. The next week, another coworker asked if the father was going to have a stroke every Thursday as it was really disruptive to the workflow. Story 10. At the first department meeting following my mother's death, our supervisor read through the minutes from the last meeting. Then she paused and added, "Oh yes, I almost forgot. Lisa's mother died last week." Okay, first agenda item. Story 11. Wow. And here I thought ripping lines of blows like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday at a cubicle with no actual walls was going to win this. Story 12. In a meeting with senior management, a colleague introduced himself and said with a straight face that he has more work experience in our field than everyone else on the team combined. Story 13. A man hired to work on a trading desk at my former company started to argue with his trainer. The trainer asserted himself, and the trainee on his third day loudly blew up, stood up shouting, and pushed some papers and supplies on his desk onto the floor. The entire office went silent and looked over. The man was escorted out and fired. I later found out that he had been given a company-sponsored credit card to pay for moving expenses that would be reimbursed. The paperwork for the credit card emphasized that the cardholder is responsible for the bill, not the company. It seems he did not read that and went straight from his firing to an electronics store to buy thousands of dollars worth of film, stereo, and television equipment he claimed to need for work. The joke was on him when he received the bill. We discovered this because he refused to pay, saying the company would cover it. The company refused, leaving the unemployed man responsible for the bill. After multiple incidents of attempted fraud like this, the credit card program was terminated. The number of attempts to fraudulently charge personal items to the company exceeded everyone's expectations. This showed me that the financial industry has many dishonest individuals at all levels of employment. Story 14. I was in a line in the cafeteria, and the lunch lady was chatting about her boyfriend as she was making my sandwich. She talked about what a great person he was and how happy he made her. I said, "I am really happy for you, and I hope I can meet someone like that someday." She said, "You probably never will." You could hear a pin drop in the line behind me. I ended up just leaving without my sandwich. Story 15. Not an office, but mixed ammonia with bleach to create, in his words, a super cleaner, and gassed the entire kitchen and dining room. Cooks and dishwashers were outside vomiting, the restaurant was evacuated, and the entire evening shift's meals were complimentary. Story 16. We had an employee celebration hosted in a casino ballroom. From the beginning, everyone was disappointed that we were not actually partying at a casino but instead endured a terrible motivational speaker. The organizer of the event was a well-known eccentric in the company. At the end of the speaker's rant, she rushed on stage, grabbed the microphone, and proceeded to share her story of a suicide attempt with all 200 of us. The room fell completely silent. It was a very intense moment. Story 17. I worked at a restaurant in the late 1990s. There was a cook who always told the female servers how much he liked tacos. He was finally fired when one of the servers got her braces removed, and everyone in the back of the restaurant was complimenting her smile. He responded, "I'd like to see your other smile." He was 28 years old. She was 17. He just looked at everyone like he was being funny. Since it was a Friday night, he was fired later that evening after the dinner rush. Story 18. A family member of mine is a teacher and had a nightmare of a principal a few years ago. The principal refused to have conversations through email and blamed her employees when things did not go as planned or when she got in trouble with the district. She even threatened to fire people for sending emails with clarifying questions. One day, an elementary student convinced her that "Crank That" by Soulja Boy was a patriotic song written to honor the troops. She then played that song on the morning announcements for the next few days. Story 19. She had been messaging me to meet about something, and I told her each time that I had other tasks to prioritize first. This woman thought she was my supervisor, so she did not like that. She came over to my desk, slammed her papers down, and angrily listed everything she wanted me to do before storming away. Our coworkers were stunned and both reported her to the manager. She went on leave the next day and never returned. Story 20. I worked in a doctor's office with a dispensary, managed by someone who had very explosive anger issues. One of our pharmacists was pregnant and had decided she would not return after having the baby. She had started a small business as a seamstress and planned to work from home doing that. The manager overheard a conversation about this and suddenly stormed through the office straight into the dispensary room where the pharmacist was working, slamming the door behind her. It is worth noting that the dispensary was once an external part of the building, originally with 2 dispensing hatches, one to the office and one to the reception area. The reception hatch had been boarded up with plywood, not brick, so you could hear everything going on inside, including the manager completely losing her temper with our pregnant pharmacist. We were in the middle of surgery, so the reception area was full of patients who all heard the manager screaming that the pharmacist was making a fool of herself by giving up a real job. She said the pharmacist's husband would never be home because he would have to get a second job to support her, along with a whole stream of really horrible insults. We were all stunned. When we heard a loud bang, we ran in, grabbed the pharmacist, and told her to go home. The bang was the manager slamming her hand on the table, but we all felt guilty for not intervening sooner. Many complaints were sent in from patients who overheard the confrontation. The manager was suspended pending an investigation into her behavior. I left shortly after that and do not know what happened next, but the pharmacist never returned after that day. Story 21. Not really a coworker, and it was not a public matter, but I did tell coworkers about it, and they also thought it was unpleasant. About 10 years ago, when my grandmother was not doing well, I informed my supervisor she was likely going to pass soon. My supervisor said, "Well, try to make sure it is a weekend when you are not working." Like, okay, let me just schedule my grandmother's death so it does not interfere with work. Grandma, do not die on a Tuesday, it will affect the productivity numbers. My grandmother lived a few months longer, and I had thankfully gotten a new job in that time. She passed when I was at work. I texted my then boss and apologized if I did not finish all my tasks that day. I was a little distracted. She called me an idiot, but then came in herself so I could go home. She let me have the rest of the week and weekend off to be with my family. I will always appreciate Emily. You were a wonderful boss. Story 22. Not the office, but the restaurant. A 40-something stressed-out server having a daily midlife crisis punched an 18-year-old server in the face in the middle of the dinner shift because he was paranoid. The dining room cleared out in the blink of an eye. Everyone lost money that night because our general manager said, "We better comp everyone and just let them go somewhere else to avoid random violence." Story 23. My office used to take on externs from a local medical billing school. One was assigned to my cubicle section and was difficult. There were already complaints about her behavior. One of the women who also sat there was a nursing mother, and she rigged up a curtain at her cubicle to close when she was pumping. This was before pumping rooms were required. The pump made a noise that was not loud, but you could hear it. One day, I heard the extern say, "What is that noise?" followed by the sound of the curtain opening and my coworker screaming. It all happened so fast, I could not warn her. The extern was dismissed that afternoon. Story 24. This is fairly mild compared to some of the other situations in this thread. The company I used to work at had a boss and owner who sent an email around the office that said something like this: "Aoife is back from a few days of sick leave. She had a miscarriage and does not want to tell anyone or talk about it. So if you could all give her a bit of space, it would be really appreciated." Of course, being the type of boss he was, he did not understand what was wrong with that email and faced no repercussions. Story 25. A new chief information officer started with the company. He introduced himself and said he was a driver and that everyone in information technology should know they live to be fired. We were a small team at the corporate level. By the end of the next month, the team was gone. I returned to the company after he was fired. Story 26. A first-year principal who was definitely not a people manager completely mishandled the end-of-year celebration. Normally, there would be a slideshow honoring those leaving and those retiring. She created a basic slide that rapidly named everyone leaving and said, "Thank you for your service." Then she clicked to the next slide for the sole person retiring. This beloved woman had worked in the district her entire adult life. The slide was blank except for her name. It had other sections like achievements, plans for retirement, picture, and funny memories, all empty. The principal said, "Oh, whoops. Anyway, thanks for your service," wrapped up the meeting, and immediately walked out to her office. The entire celebration, which normally takes 20 minutes, lasted maybe 3 minutes. You could have heard a pin drop. The first sound made was a teacher hysterically crying because she felt so bad for the retiring teacher. Story 27. I used to work in a bank in my mid-20s with an awful micromanager of a boss, Mary. She came in early Friday morning and said she had a mortgage to process for some clients and we needed to stockpile cash because she could not be interrupted. So I had $20,000 split between 20s, 50s, and hundreds in my spare drawer right before we opened for the day. Fridays were the busiest days because it was payday. $20,000 would last me until around lunchtime on an average day. Not that day. My first customer wanted $20,000 in all hundreds. No one could spare any for me, so I had to get Mary to give me more from the vault, which was in the same area where we kept the metal safe deposit boxes. Needless to say, that area echoed. She made me follow her in there where she scolded me harshly for my failure to prepare, said she would have to restart the process for her customers, and called me an embarrassment to the business. She did not care that this was unusual for a business day. The bank, which had been pleasantly noisy with conversations from tellers and customers, was silent throughout her rant. The man I had looked at me sympathetically, along with every other person in the building who had the unpleasant experience of hearing it all. I locked up my area and hid in the bathroom to cry. She fired me not long after for other reasons. She hated me, and I have many stories about that woman, who was by far the worst boss I have ever had. Story 28. I worked in a real estate office years ago as the only person working there. I was new, and there was another new lady as well. She was middle-aged, married, had kids, and was very involved in church. This was a very formal and successful office with high-performing agents. One evening, we were all in a group chat that had been going for about 20 minutes discussing real estate and life. Suddenly, this new lady posted a very graphic close-up picture of a woman's legs spread wide open with her private area fully visible. It was clearly not her. "Oh my God," she said. "I have been hacked." There was complete silence. The group chat ended. It was never mentioned again, and she continued working there. Story 29. Not the whole office, but a couple of people. Back when I was an intern, my mentor was an account executive and her manager was an account supervisor. We all worked on the same account. Also of note, the entire office shared a parking pass and would hand it off so that one person could park per day. One day, the account supervisor had the parking pass and she emailed me asking if I could come down and grab the pass after she left the space. I replied, "Yeah, no problem." A couple of minutes later, I received a 5-paragraph email lambasting me for using unprofessional phrasing and saying this would look terrible if used with a client. In case anyone was curious, she took issue with me saying, "Yeah." She also copied in the account executive because I think she wanted her to talk to me and reiterate how unprofessional I was being. The account executive tracked me down today and said, "Yeah, the account supervisor occasionally just likes having her ass kissed. Just ignore everything she said." Less than a week later, our client emailed the team saying someone on their team missed a deadline to create artwork, so we needed to push back our campaign by a day. The account supervisor responded, "Oh my goodness, a noiseballs." I just burst out laughing. The account executive ended up sending both emails to the vice president who managed us all. During my one-on-one with the vice president later that week, he said, "Yeah, that was bad. But the account supervisor likes having her ass kissed." Story 30. I was sitting in a shared office space when an older male who worked outside our direct office came in to say something. I didn't understand what he said, so I asked him to repeat it. He replied, "No, no, don't back up. Be a good girl. Take it all." When he left, another male coworker asked, "Did he really just say that?" That coworker then reported him, which I greatly appreciate. Story 31. First, a bit of backstory. We have a beloved staff member who was getting married. I will call her N. She is the sweetest, kindest person ever. She has also had her fair share of family trauma, so we tend to be very protective of her. She is a Christian and believes in no sex before marriage. As her friends, we were basically giving her the sex education she never got, albeit in a more adult and group of girlfriends kind of way. We are a very close-knit group. We always had a good laugh, and she actually appreciated the information. Well, enter the difficult one, H. One day, N and H were in the lunchroom on break at the same time. H said, "Hey N, you should try this sometime," and proceeded to show her a very up-close video of a woman masturbating and squirting. Who was the woman? Herself. Poor N was shell-shocked. She didn't know what to say. When she told me about it 10 days later, she was bawling her eyes out. She was just trying to block out the trauma. I was horrified. I asked if she wanted me to report it to our boss. She did, so I did. H was fired the next day. Guess what? That was not the part that made the office go silent, because we definitely did not stay silent. We had a really terrible manager at the time. I reported the incident to the business owner, not the manager. The manager decided it was appropriate to give N a write-up for viewing inappropriate videos on the premises. Then she decided to give me a write-up for gossiping. I absolutely refused to sign it and insisted they rip up the one N reluctantly signed, which they eventually did. Everyone was astonished. That manager did not last long. Story 32. One day I came to work and saw caution tape around the door of the women's restroom on my floor. Call center. Over 500 employees across 4 floors. I asked a manager about it, and they just shook their head and said no. A week passed, and there was even more tape on the door. I began investigating. I had heard something unpleasant was happening in the women's restroom. A day or two later, a female coworker walked quickly past me, and you could feel the anger radiating from her. During a smoke break, I asked her about it. She shut down and went inside. The next morning, I got into the elevator to go to my floor. The female janitor was inside with lots of cleaning supplies. I asked her about the situation. She said, "Some person is smearing feces all over the walls, mirrors, and writing with it." I almost took a sick day but knew I needed to see this through. We all had access to the employee schedules and could see who was working each day. Half the workforce was male and therefore not suspects. As days went by, we started playing a guessing game about the culprit's identity. Does the suspect wear a hat? No. Does the suspect have blonde hair? No. Within a week, I saw technical employees moving a closed-circuit television camera from one of the front doors to install it right outside the women's restroom. Management was also trying to identify the culprit. Weeks went by with random attacks here and there. The offender could tell the pressure was increasing. She started using tactics that impressed me. One day, a woman I know came out of the restroom red in the face. She told me the culprit was now creating time delays. She had put a handful of feces between stacks of paper towels in the dispenser. Could have been there for hours or days, who knows? When the woman pulled out a paper towel, a handful of cold feces landed in her hand. Management was crossing off names, but they weren't making much progress. My 2 coworkers and I were pulled aside and asked for our information as we had been investigating longer than management. We shared our lists. At this point, I had a strong suspicion about who was responsible, but management, rightfully, told me to keep it to myself or management. I didn't snitch. I wanted this madness to continue, if I'm being honest. One day, police arrived at work. The workplace shut down. Everyone stood and stared. I saw my suspect get pulled into an office. The door closed, and the work floor erupted in applause, laughter, and a noticeable sense of relief swept over the office. Later, we saw her walked out of the office. Hours later, During a smoke break outside, she stopped every coworker coming and going, insisting it wasn't her and she would never do that. It was absolutely proven to be her. After that weekend, I approached some people to see if they would donate so we could buy the only female janitor some coffee and restaurant gift cards. She deserves a lot more than that. Thank you for reading this account of the miscreant my job dubbed the feces vandal. Be well. Story 33. I am a teacher. I had a job at a junior high school where the entire administration was toxic. I took the regular amount of grieving time when my brother passed away during my first semester. Then, the following February, I took about 3 weeks off, which was all my paid leave, because my son was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that was affecting his skull and needed an operation immediately to remove it. Once I depleted my allotted days, I applied for the Family and Medical Leave Act but did not have to use it. When I returned, in every meeting, the assistant principal would say, "Well, that didn't get done because Mr. Name walked out on his job," or "When you left your post the first time," and "When you left us in that lurch in November when my brother died." Although that only silenced me, I couldn't believe what she was saying. I was let go the following week. That was the worst year of my adult life. Story 34. This was a restaurant at a casino. A waitress's infant died. The memorial service was on a Tuesday. The shift supervisor allowed as many people as possible to attend the service, saying, "Go, be supportive, you have an hour." During his daily rounds, the food and beverage director happened to come into the restaurant during this time. When he saw how short-staffed we were, he became very angry. "I don't care whose baby died. The employees scheduled are supposed to be here. Get them back now." The man was notorious for being difficult and oversaw hundreds of employees. Not one had a good word to say about him, but I was still shocked he said something so awful. Story 35. Pulled a pile of old fingernails out of her pocket and started chewing on them. I fired her shortly afterward. Story 36. Both my coworker and I were slightly overweight. I didn't talk much with her since we had different jobs, and I was often running from building to building in our complex to get signatures for documents. I thought we were somewhat friendly. We had gone for coffee a few times in the cafeteria. One day, I wore a green shirt with a slight cutout near the neck. My coworker came in wearing the same shirt. She worked a later shift, usually from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., while most of us worked from 7 or 8 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m. One of our male colleagues joked that we were twins and asked if we had gone shopping together. Although it was in poor taste, I laughed and said, "Great minds think alike." What my coworker did next caused everyone in the office to go quiet and awkwardly return to their work. She lost her temper. She accused me of copying her, said I always tried to be exactly like her, and claimed I stalked her when she went to get coffee. She yelled at me directly. Everyone went silent. I sat down and cried. She apologized about a week later with a letter and a necklace she bought for me, but I never talked to her again. My contract ended 2 months later, and I was relieved to leave that area. Story 37. Had a coworker start talking about his granddaughter's little strawberries. He was talking about her nipples. He also frequently complained that his daughter avoided him and would not let him see his granddaughter. I hesitate to call him a pedophile only because he definitely harassed any woman in their 20s and younger. Story 38. Super toxic boss. Known for emotional outbursts even in front of management. Usually because of deadlines she decided were unfair, causing unnecessary stress. She started doing this thing where she would get herself so worked up. She would throw her own glasses like a child. She did it enough times that they finally broke. It was hard not to laugh at her when she sought sympathy for that. When the whole situation finally came to an end and she had burned enough bridges to be removed from the contract, one of those same managers came to me and said he did not know it was so bad, meaning he did not realize how horrible it was to work for her. Really? You did not notice her throwing fits and breaking her glasses until they broke? Whatever. Story 39. Carried his shotgun into the office, racked it and said, "Which one of you is first?" He was joking, and the owners of the company let him get away with it. Story 40. Not in an office, but when I worked retail about 20 years ago, one manager was making fake returns onto his personal card. He did this over a period of time and stole more than $20,000. Police came and arrested him in handcuffs one day. I have no idea how he thought he would never be caught. Story 41. My coworker casually used a racial slur very loudly in the middle of an otherwise normal conversation. We all just stared at her in shocked silence. Luckily, there were no customers in the shop at the time. I lost all respect I had for her that day. Story 42. The head of human resources was very judgmental about almost everything, especially people's weight and eating habits. She disliked potlucks in particular because there was so much food. We had one for a holiday, and she came down to examine all the food options. She then sent an office-wide email with the calorie count of everything in the potluck, telling us how many thousands of calories we would be consuming that day. She spent the rest of the day sulking in her cubicle. She did many other unpleasant things, but this incident upset a lot of people and led to the boss telling her to back off and let everyone enjoy their lunch. Story 43. I work at a startup that is transitioning to opening. A coworker's position ended because it was no longer needed, but she could reapply for other positions when they became available. She had worked there for 3 years and was the second longest tenured employee. However, her attitude was like Animal from the Muppets, and no one liked her. When a position opened up and she applied, she did not get past the phone screening because she said, "It must be strange interviewing someone who knows more about the job than you," to our new vice president. Story 44. He did not get the promotion he had been craving for 10 years. He went into his office and worked very hard. Story 45. We had a team meeting and a coworker said jokingly, "We should cream pie the senior leadership," and laughed. We all stopped, dead silent. Then he said, like a clown throws a cream pie in people's faces. And we realized we had all thought the worst version of the original idea. Story 46. He pushed a student with Down syndrome and autism out of an egg chair and then said, "Act normal." One of the teachers ran to help the student, and I stepped outside the room to call administration. There was silence from everyone, and I was thinking, "You act normal, dirtbag." To this day, he denies any wrongdoing. I believe he thinks he is innocent and a skilled professional working with people with disabilities. Story 47. The new boss called a full staff meeting to introduce herself. She started with an icebreaker game where everyone was to say their name, where they were born, and a fun fact about themselves. She went first and shared that as a child, she hugged her cat to death. The room was silent as we all realized we worked for a sociopath. To this day, I am more disturbed by her choice to share that as a funny anecdote than by the story itself. She turned out to be exactly as toxic as you would expect. Story 48. A few years ago, I had a terrible accident during a work trip. I went for a jog after a meeting around a city I barely knew and got too close to a house. It had no fence but 2 large attack dogs. The encounter did not go well for me. They literally tore flesh from my legs, arms, and shoulder. Luckily, someone heard my shouts and called the dogs off. I ended up in a nearby hospital. I was in a mid-sized town in a developing country not known for its healthcare system. I had 1 surgery on the spot and was medevaced to the neighboring country. I saw some incredible plastic surgeons but did not become prettier. I was fortunate to be able to walk again as the dogs had just missed a major nerve in my leg. I had a few more surgeries and a skin graft before I could fly home. I think I spent 6 weeks away from the office before hobbling back in. My coworkers greeted me with a small party, a large bouquet of flowers I could barely lift, and a nice cake. While everyone was happy I was back, and some were amazed I was not wheeled in, my manager took me aside to say that despite being ill, I should not slack at work because there was a lot to catch up on. Story 49. Followed another colleague to the bathroom, berating her loudly all the way. She would have followed her in if the door had not been slammed in her face. Story 50. Appeared to be intoxicated. Turned off the lights and began covering the windows with cardboard. Someone retrieved her supervisor, and they escorted her to human resources. Story 51. Small office. I was working on something for my manager. A colleague asked for my help with something. Being a compassionate human, I began explaining when my manager, who sat within earshot, turned around and loudly said, "You work for me, not him." The other coworker and I just looked at each other in disbelief. In a guess I can't help you, bud way. It was the worst place I have worked in my life, and I did not last 6 months before handing in my notice. Story 52. Worked in a call center for a large law firm. A very sweet 20-year-old girl had been diagnosed with cancer, although I cannot remember the type, and needed surgery to remove a mass from her shoulder. When she requested time off, her manager's boss asked if she could reschedule it due to work demands. This was said in the kitchen break room in front of people, as if it were not an outrageous question to ask, even in private. Story 53. Some individual who was always behind and could never get up to speed, no matter how many times people helped him, threatened to shoot up the office and everyone in it. He mimed shooting a gun and made accompanying noises. It was almost laughable. We all knew he was involved with a white supremacist militia that was already under investigation. On the day he was let go, half of us refused to return to the office that Friday afternoon after lunch, just in case. He ended up in federal prison, so it's unlikely he will ever return. However, people working there still worry about him, and I don't blame them. Story 54. A coworker of mine at a nursing home where I worked was such a great guy. He worked overnight shifts so during the day he could take care of his elderly parents. At shift change one day, I sat and talked with him as usual, gave hugs, and went home for the night. The next day, my work daughter texted me saying she was asked to work the overnight shift and would see me at shift change instead. We didn't see our friend at shift change and asked the registered nurse in charge where Jack was. She bluntly said, "Oh, he died last night. That's why your friend is here tonight." She just walked away like it wasn't a big deal. Not even 24 hours prior, we were chatting and having a good start to his shift, and then he died of his own cancer he never told a soul about. Needless to say, neither of us work at that nursing home anymore, and I ended up in emergency therapy. It affected me that much. Rest in peace, Jack. Despite the heartless registered nurses and the director of nursing we had there, you are still missed by me and my work daughter. You are never going to be forgotten. Story 55. Back in the day of private branch exchange phone systems, I worked for a small mid-priced hotel downtown running the phone board. Most everyone was amazing to work with, except for one of the security guards who loved to show off his gun by twirling it around his index finger, drank on the job, and bragged about cheating on his girlfriend with various guests in their hotel rooms, which was very much against hotel policy at the time. At some point, this security guard warned me that there was a bat in the hallway near the pool and wanted to give me a heads up, as he was concerned that the hotel guests would call down to the front desk to complain about gunfire, since he was planning to shoot it. By the time the front desk finished staring, we managed to come to our senses and stop him. He was escorted out by management very soon after that. According to accounts, he was blacklisted by the hotel chain. The other security guard was relieved the man was let go. I gathered the cardboard board from an old tabletop game we kept in the lobby for guests to borrow and an empty garbage can. Then I went upstairs, caught the bat, and released it in the parking garage near the exit so it could fly off once night fell. Story 56. Not as dramatic as most of these, but a generally sexist, racist, jerk coworker once mentioned during a meeting. These stupid sensitivity and anti-harassment trainings they make us do all the time are so annoying. We all kind of blinked at him, as we certainly did not have to do them. Later, they made everyone do the trainings every year, which was indeed annoying but probably better that they were not targeted. Story 57. I did not know if this person did not understand how periods work, but many years ago, I experienced the embarrassment of standing up to find I had bled all over my skirt and ruined a pale blue chair at work. For the rest of my time there, not a single day passed without this person coming up to me and making an insensitive remark about destroying company property or saying it was a bloody good day. Some of the other co-workers tried to be kind, but it was mortifying. Story 58. At a grocery store, the manager pulled the pregnant cashier into her office near the registers. A few minutes passed before we heard the manager screaming about how the cashier was not reliable and could not keep taking days off for doctor appointments. Everyone's heads turned to the door. When the pregnant cashier walked out, she was in tears. I quit that week. I heard the manager was fired within the month. Story 59. About 15 years ago, I was working in telecommunications. At a staff meeting, the project manager told us to submit our time off requests for the holidays. He asked my coworker, "When is Black Christmas this year? Do you need time off for that?" She blinked a few times and said, "What? Black Christmas?" He replied, "Yeah. Isn't it near Christmas but different every year? Do you mean Kwanzaa? I don't celebrate Kwanzaa." He was pleased she did not want extra time off while the rest of us cringed inside. Story 60. A lead was promoted to supervisor, but the upper management was ineffective. The supervisor was lazy, incompetent, bossy, and condescending, especially toward people of color. Several employees sent emails to human resources and management complaining about the situation. A large meeting was held where management told the employees to stop infighting, which was an attempt to silence them. During the meeting, the supervisor begged and cried for someone to defend her, but no one did. It was the most awkward work meeting ever. Afterward, she approached people individually, asking why everyone had just shrugged it off. I told her diplomatically that I did not think she was suited for the job. She cornered me at my desk until I said something, and I was worried she would complain to upper management. She eventually stepped down as manager, quit, and was replaced by a much better manager. I have since been working elsewhere for about 4 years. Story 61. A woman in our office was pregnant with her first baby. One day, she had to go to the doctor at around 38 weeks. She didn't come back, and the next day our unit was gathered in a room and told she had lost the baby and was in the hospital giving birth. We are a tight-knit group, and we were all devastated for her. One team lead, who thinks she runs the entire department, said, "She does not want anyone contacting her at the moment. I will let you know when to contact her." Spoiler alert, she never informed us. It turned out this woman knew the announcement was being made and was wondering why no one had contacted her. One of the other women, who was best friends with her, gave us updates and told us when to reach out because the team lead was gatekeeping information about someone else's stillbirth. This happened twice more in the next couple of years for this woman, late-term losses, and each time, the team lead tried to be the sole source of information and acted very strangely. When word got out, people were very upset. Story 62. While working in a white-collar position at a very large industrial facility, I had a coworker catch a squirrel alive in a humane trap and then drown it in the office kitchenette sink in front of the entire office. After no action was taken by management, I started looking for a new job. Story 63. I was working at a Starbucks kiosk inside a grocery store. It was just me and another coworker working one evening. We still do not know what caused it, but I started to have an anaphylactic allergic reaction. I told my coworker I would be leaving to go to the emergency room. My mother offered to quickly pick me up and take me there since the hospital is just down the road. My coworker begged me to stay so she would not have to close alone. I was literally dying. Technically, no one was around except my coworker and me, but it made me speechless. Story 64. Not toxic, just dumb. A coworker was telling us how the previous night he went to a restaurant for dinner. A woman came in drunk and became aggressive, and the police arrived to arrest her. He kept emphasizing how large the woman was, unable to get over her weight and size. Then he turned to me and said, "I mean, you're huge, and she even made you look small." Silence. I just closed my eyes, sighed, and went back to work. Everyone else awkwardly looked around and did the same. I don't know if he realized what he said or if someone said something to him, but he did not speak to me for months after that until he had to. Story 65. I have a story involving me. I work remotely, meaning I'm away from home for weeks at a time. During COVID-19, I was classified as an essential worker and didn't have many restrictions. I could travel overseas, etc. I had been away from home for over 12 weeks. For the last 2 weeks, I was working at a site, completing all the required urgent tasks, and counting the days until I saw my kids. I had a cutoff date. The site supervisor, a good guy and a longtime friend, asked if I could do one more job. It was okay if I couldn't, but he wanted to check. I told him it wasn't possible because it would take longer than we had. He was fine with that and said he would get it deferred. On the day I was getting ready to fly out, the site manager was there listing tasks and said, Siren 66, you'll do that vessel task in the laydown yard this week. I said, not possible. I'm flying out today. He said, sorry, I've told the client it'll be done. I responded, it won't be me. I haven't seen my kids in 12 weeks, and I'm leaving today regardless. His response, well, maybe you shouldn't have had kids. The whole room of 24 men went dead silent and looked at each other. I said, how about you leave? And stormed out the door. I heard the room erupt behind me with a fair amount of criticism toward him. The supervisor came straight out and apologized. He had no idea the manager would say that. About 30 minutes later, the manager called me in for a meeting to apologize and explain he thought he was making a joke about the kids and should have read the situation better since everyone had been away from their families for so long. He admitted he told the client it would get done, but said no one informed him I had already spent 3 months away, though I believe he knew. Story 66. I worked at an incredibly unprofessional college with a highly sophisticated gossip network. I heard one of my colleagues was getting fired the next day. She called me at home to ask if she was getting fired. To be clear, I was just a grunt, not a manager and certainly not hers. But I happened to be informed and knew that she was indeed getting fired. She spent the whole day being belligerent to everyone who walked by her office. We wanted to go to lunch, and she yelled out, I'd like to go, but I'm getting fired today, and things like that. Sure enough, the human resources woman came in at midday on a Tuesday and told all of us to go to lunch. We did. They were still there when we got back. It was incredibly awkward to watch her pack and listen to her give away belongings like this. Michelle, do you want my sticky notes? Other lady, I'll take them. Fired lady, no, you're a bitch. The last we saw of her, she was dragging a huge decorative wooden totem from her shoulder out of her office and across the carpet to the door, like Jesus carrying the cross. Human resources followed her out, and that was that. We were all expected to go back to work like we had not just watched a termination handled with any care or precision. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.